Ziltrax floated silently inside his small scout ship, orbiting a blue and green planet the locals called Earth. He was a junior xenobiologist from the Galactic Union, sent on a routine mission to scan newly discovered life-supporting worlds. It was supposed to be easy. Quick scan, basic report, and return. But this was not easy. His 4 black eyes twitched nervously as he looked at the data flashing across his screen. Atmosphere, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Wait, that's too much oxygen. Flammable levels. Gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. Too high for most species. Bones will break. Water, contains acid ... Humans call it salt. Toxic to many life forms. Ziltrax stared at the screen, confused. This planet should be dead, he whispered. And yet, the next scan came through. Life signs, billions, intelligent species confirmed. Ziltrax's tentacles tightened. What species could survive on such a death world? He activated the ship's AI recorder and began speaking. Log 23. Subject: Earth. This planet should not support life, especially intelligent life. High radiation, shifting weather, unstable tectonic plates, active volcanoes, and highly dangerous local fauna. Classification: Deathworld Class 13, at minimum. The AI beeped. Correction: possible reclassification to Deathworld Class 14. He swallowed nervously. He opened a live feed from the surface. A satellite view zoomed in. A group of humans were running toward a fire. Are they attacking it? Ziltrax asked in shock. No. They were saving others trapped inside. Burning smoke filled the air. Temperatures were deadly, and still, the humans ran into the flames, wearing only light armor and masks. Insanity, Ziltrax whispered. They are not only surviving, they are fighting this planet. He switched to another feed. A human floating in the cold vacuum of space, repairing a massive space station. No protection from radiation, no gravity. One tear in that suit and he's dead. Still working, calmly. Even joking with teammates. What kind of species jokes near death? He accessed their news data. Wars, diseases, natural disasters. Yet their city stood tall. Their people kept living, rebuilding, and moving forward. Nothing stopped them. He watched a video of a human climbing a frozen mountain during a blizzard. With frostbitten hands and torn clothes, the man reached the top and raised his arms in victory. Why? Ziltrax said out loud. Why do they do this? Suddenly, a warning blinked on the screen. Incoming message from Galactic Union Command. Abort observation. This species is Class 7 hostile. Avoid contact at all costs. They are known as humans. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Ziltrax blinked. Too late. He looked out the window. A human satellite had already locked onto his ship. An Earth-based defense station was sending a signal. Unidentified object in orbit. Respond or be considered a threat. He froze. Then, a strange thing happened. Instead of firing weapons, the humans sent a message. It was a picture, a cartoon of a smiling green alien shaking hands with a human astronaut. Below it was a sentence. Welcome to Earth, let's be friends, or at least not enemies. Ziltrax stared at the screen in silence. Why are they like this? He asked no one. He reviewed the biological data of humans. Can survive temperatures from -50 to +50 degrees Celsius. Can eat almost anything, plants, animals, even toxic items. Emotionally unstable, but highly adaptive. Social bonds extremely strong. Will fight for family, tribe, even strangers. Will die for ideas. His voice shook as he recorded another log. They live on a planet that should kill them daily. They fight storms, climb mountains, dive into oceans, go to space, and they laugh while doing it. They are not immune to pain. They just keep going. I don't understand them. But I fear them. Suddenly, another image flashed on his screen. It was from a human file. A quote, "Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times." Ziltrax frowned. "A species that understands its own rise and fall, and still moves forward." He finally turned off the scanners. This was not just any world. This was a place of chaos, strength, madness, and resilience. Earth. Deathworld 13? No, technically. Earth is a Class 14 Deathworld, he said softly. And the worst part? They like it that way. Ziltrax hadn't slept. Not because his species needed sleep like humans, but because his mind wouldn't allow him to rest. He had witnessed things that bent the logic of science, biology, and even sanity. Earth was not just hostile, it was a living nightmare, a planet wrapped in beauty and soaked in danger. And the beings that lived there, humans, they didn't just survive the madness. They thrived in it. They laughed in it. He had spent the last 3 rotations orbiting Earth, collecting more data, digging deeper into their culture, their behavior, their instincts. The more he saw, the more disturbed he became. And the more disturbed he became, the more fascinated he was. He watched footage of something called extreme sports, a human term for voluntary activities where injury or even death was part of the risk. They jumped from flying machines, tied ropes to cliffs, and dangled thousands of meters above the ground. Some rode thin boards on roaring waves taller than buildings. Others ran for miles in deserts without water, pushed their bodies until their legs gave out, and still. They smiled. Why did they smile? In one video, a human stood at the edge of a mountain cliff. Wind roared around him. His body was wrapped in a special suit with wing-like extensions. He looked down at the rocks below, then jumped. No hesitation. No fear, just a wide grin. He soared between sharp rocks at terrifying speeds. One small error, death. He screamed something during the flight. Ziltrax replayed it, translating the phrase, "Woo! Let's freaking goo." Not a war cry, not a scream of fear. A cry of joy. Ziltrax noted the moment in his log. Human specimen displays excitement while narrowly avoiding death. Behavior suggests ... pleasure in danger. Possible madness or deep evolutionary adaptation. Will investigate further. He began to research deeper, not just behaviors, but psychology, culture, history. And what he found was more disturbing than he expected. Their history was painted in blood. Wars across centuries. Empires rising and falling. Entire populations wiped out by disease, famine, and violence. Yet each time, the humans came back, stronger, smarter, faster. He read about the Black Death, the world wars, nuclear threats, global plagues, climate disasters, but none of them had destroyed humanity. They always found a way to adapt. They didn't run from chaos. They built homes in it. He accessed an archive of human quotes. One stood out. "Fall 7 times, stand up 8. Simple words, but powerful. It captured the very essence of this species. They were not unbreakable, they were just never willing to stay broken. In one recorded event, a human soldier was trapped under a collapsed building, both legs crushed. He was conscious, bleeding, alone. He couldn't move. But he had a small radio, and he used it not to call for help, but to give orders to save others who were trapped nearby. He stayed awake for hours, guiding rescue teams until everyone else was safe. Then he passed out. He lived. When interviewed months later, he laughed and said, it wasn't that bad. Others had it worse. Ziltrax paused the video, staring at the screen in silence. Pain tolerance, beyond measurable levels. Prioritizes group survival over self. Shows humor in near death. Species possibly unstable or evolved for survival at any cost. Another log. Another mystery. He watched as a child, no older than 5, fell from a small height and scraped her knee. She cried for a moment, then stood, looked at her wound, and said, "I'm okay." She wiped the blood on her sleeve and ran off laughing. It wasn't just adults. It was in all of them. Xiltrax leaned back in his seat, his skin twitching with a mixture of fear and awe. How did the universe allow such a species to exist? He checked the status of his report to the Galactic Union. A blinking warning sat at the top of the file. Caution: further observation of species 12H humans may result in psychological disturbance. Proceed with extreme care. He ignored it. He wasn't disturbed. Not anymore. He was obsessed. Then something new happened. His ship picked up a strange signal, not military, not threatening. It was music, a human broadcast. The song had no translator context, just loud beats and energy. It played on repeat. "I'm a survivor. I'm gonna make it." He didn't understand the words, but somehow he felt them. Xiltrax floated silently, looking down at Earth once more. A planet that didn't care if you lived or died. A world where storms had names, animals had venom, plants could eat you, and the ground could shake or burn at any time. And in the middle of all that, humans danced, laughed, loved, and built cities that scraped the sky. They weren't built to survive Earth. Earth was built to test them, and they passed every time. He turned off the music, turned off the scanners. He didn't need more data tonight. Only one question echoed in his mind now. If they can survive that planet, what happens when they leave it? Xiltrax hadn't spoken in hours. His ship was quiet. The lights were dim. The stars outside floated peacefully, unaware that just one planet below, something terrifying had grown and evolved. He stared at the swirling clouds of Earth, through the observation window, its blue oceans shining under sunlight, its green lands glowing with life. It looked beautiful, calm, peaceful, but he now knew better. He had watched the humans run toward fire, laugh in storms, leap off cliffs, and dance in deserts. But that wasn't the part that truly disturbed him. It was what came next, the part he couldn't understand. The part that made him question everything the Galactic Union had ever told him about intelligent life. He was no longer scanning their behavior. Now, he was diving into their history. He opened the ancient data archives he had downloaded from human satellites and networks. The files were disorganized, written in hundreds of different languages, some filled with poetry and dreams, others covered in blood and screams. Still, he translated them all, one by one. The first thing he noticed: Earth was never kind to them. From the very beginning, they were prey. Lightning storms, floods, freezing ice, wild beasts with claws and fangs. Humans were soft, slow, weak compared to other creatures on their planet. No natural weapons, no thick hide, no venom, no wings, no claws. Just brains, and those brains learned quickly. They made fire. They made tools. Then they made weapons. And with those, they hunted. Everything that once hunted them. Mammoths, lions, wolves, serpents. They didn't just fight to live. They fought to dominate. Over time they built walls, then cities, then empires. But even then, they didn't stop fighting. Xiltrax scanned timeline after timeline. From small tribal wars to battles that covered continents. Humans had a long, dark history of turning against their own, for resources, for power, for pride. They made machines of war, trained their children to fight, built fortresses, bombs, and weapons that could destroy entire nations in seconds. And yet, every time they burned, they rebuilt. Every time they fell, they stood again. He found footage from a place called Hiroshima. A city once full of life, turned to ash in an instant. But 40 years later, the same city was alive again. Humans, walking the streets, laughing, building, forgiving. Forgiving? Xiltrax whispered aloud. After all that, they forgive? He couldn't believe it. But the records didn't lie. Somehow, in all their pain and rage, they had also learned kindness. They made art during war, sang songs in prison camps, sent doctors to enemy nations after natural disasters. Humans weren't just strong. They were contradictory. They destroyed, then healed, hated, then loved, fought, then hugged. How? Why? He kept digging. Reading journals, books, watching documentaries, analyzing old recordings from the past few thousand years. And something started to form in his mind, something terrifying and inspiring at the same time. The humans were not violent by nature. They were simply ready for anything. They had been tested again and again by the worst the universe could throw at them. Ice ages, plagues, famine, invasions, diseases, civil wars, genocides, nuclear accidents, climate disasters, and through it all, they changed. They suffered, but they learned. And most importantly, they remembered. He saw pictures of museums built to honor their mistakes, statues for peacekeepers, monuments for the lost, books written by those who survived the worst, so others could read and never forget. They didn't erase their pain. They preserved it. As Ziltrax studied, he noticed something else, a pattern. Every time humanity hit a low point, they came back higher. After war came inventions. After disease came medicine. After destruction came unity. He found something called the space race, humans competing to reach space during the Cold War. It should have led to another battle, but instead, it pushed them to reach the stars. They landed on their moon with technology that was primitive by galactic standards, but powered by pure will. The report he typed had no answers, only questions. Is it possible that humans evolved through disaster? Do they grow stronger the more they suffer? Have we been avoiding them not because they are dangerous, but because we fear what they might become? Then something caught his attention. A message from a human commander recorded after a massive world war. The world broke us. Then we rebuilt it, stronger, wiser, but we never forgot what it cost. Ziltrax closed the file and leaned back, silent again. He looked at Earth, so small, so fragile from this distance. But he knew now. This planet had bred something unmatched. Not just survivors. Not just fighters. Endure RS. He imagined what would happen if humans ever united. Not just in small groups or alliances, but fully. One species, one voice, one purpose. Would the galaxy be ready? No. Not even close. His final log entry for the day was only one sentence. They are forged in fire, and they do not fear the flames. Asterisk. The silence inside the ship had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, electric, filled with something Ziltrax had no word for. He floated near the communication chamber, staring at the blinking symbol on his screen, a direct transmission from Earth. Not a warning, not a threat. An invitation. He didn't understand it at first. The signal was old-style radio, primitive and weak by galactic standards. But embedded within it was a human voice. Clear, calm, recorded and sent in loop. To whoever's out there. We see you. You don't need to hide. We'd like to talk. Ziltrax had spent weeks hiding in the shadows, scanning Earth, watching humans from orbit like they were some strange, violent experiment. Now they had turned the lens around. They were watching back, and more than that, they were reaching out. Every protocol in his mind screamed to retreat. But curiosity, it was louder. Curiosity had always been louder. So he responded. The meeting was arranged in neutral orbit, aboard a human-built research vessel called Aurora Station. Small, crude, but self-sustaining. And more importantly, peaceful. The docking bay opened with a slow hiss. Ziltrax stepped onto human steel for the first time. The room was bright, warm. Artificial gravity was clumsy but manageable. His sensors picked up traces of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and something else. Coffee. The bitter scent of human ritual. He stood still, unsure what to expect. He had seen their war machines, their sports, their chaos. But now standing before him was none of that. It was just one man, tall, aging, wrapped in a clean flight uniform. Soft gray in the hair, but sharp eyes. He had the relaxed posture of someone who had seen too much, and still stood straight. He extended a hand. "Name's Commander Ray Hammond. Welcome aboard." Ziltrax blinked. The gesture was familiar, handshake, a sign of peace. He reached out a tendril and touched the man's hand. Warm, dry, alive. I'm Ziltrax, Observer, Level 3, the human smiled. "Been watching us long?" Ziltrax tilted his head. "Too long. And not long enough." They sat across from each other in a small room with soft chairs. Not a war room. Not a lab. Just two beings sharing space. Ray poured himself coffee and offered a second mug to Ziltrax, who scanned it carefully. Caffeine, mild stimulant, toxic to several galactic species. Extremely bitter, addictive. Also, consumed daily by humans in large amounts. By choice, Ziltrax declined politely. Ray took a sip and smiled. Didn't think so. Acquired taste. They sat in silence for a while. Then the questions began. Ziltrax didn't ask about weapons or politics. He didn't care about economics or borders. He asked about something else entirely. "Why do you laugh? Even when you're hurt?" Ray paused. A long breath escaped him. "Because if we don't, we cry, and if we cry too long, we stop moving. Can't afford that." Ziltrax recorded every word. "Why do you risk your lives for strangers?" "Because someone did it for us. Long time ago. We pass it forward." "Why do you destroy each other?" Ray stared into his cup. "We don't want to. But sometimes we forget we're the same. It's our flaw, but we're working on it." Ziltrax hesitated, then asked the one question he had feared the most. "You live on a planet full of poison, storms, beasts, and pain. You fight each other, you suffer, you break, again and again. And yet you rebuild every time. Why?" Ray leaned back and looked out the small window toward Earth, spinning in the distance, glowing in soft blue light. "Because we have to. Because nobody's coming to save us. We learned that early. It's just us down there. And we either fight through it, or we vanish." He turned back to the alien. "We don't survive because we're strong. We survive because we're stubborn." Ziltrax didn't speak. He simply stared. This was the first time he'd spoken with a human face to face. No screens, no translations, no recordings. Just a conversation. And it shook him more than any war footage ever had, because this man was not special. He was not a general, not a leader, not a hero. He was normal. And that made it worse. If even the average human held this much willpower, this much belief, this much pain wrapped in calm, what would the extraordinary ones be like? Ray finished his drink. "You came looking for monsters, didn't you?" he said with a grin. "Found something worse?" Ziltrax nodded slowly. "I found humans." The two sat in silence again, not as enemies, not as experiments and subjects, but as beings from different stars, connected by something strange and unspoken. Finally, as Ziltrax stood to leave, Ray said one last thing. "We're not the scariest because we fight. We're scary because we keep fighting. Even when it hurts, even when it's pointless, even when no one's watching. We keep going." Ziltrax turned before walking through the exit. "I used to think your world was dangerous. Now I know. Your minds are." Ray smiled. "Welcome to Earth, friend." The doors slid shut. Ziltrax returned to his ship. Not afraid, not anymore. But something inside him had changed. He didn't fear the humans. He respected them. And that was far more dangerous. Asterisk the stars outside his ship looked the same as before. Quiet. Distant. Cold. But to Ziltrax, nothing felt the same anymore. He had spoken to a human. Sat across from one. Looked into their eyes, heard their voice, and sensed. No fear, not even when they knew what he was. Not even when they knew he had come to study, to judge, to classify their species. And that was terrifying. He had returned to his vessel with more than just data. He had brought back a feeling, not fear, not respect. Something in between. Something he hadn't felt before, like a small cold spot deep in his chest. Unknowing, they were not monsters, they were not demons, they were just human. And somehow, that was worse. He turned back to his screens. He wasn't done. Not yet. His next file was titled simply, Human Combat Behavior, Military and Civilian Response in Conflict. He opened it. For 3 days, he watched war. Not just the weapons, though those were horrifying enough. Guns, tanks, ships, satellites, and bombs with the power to destroy entire cities. He watched missiles streak across the sky like firebirds, submarines hiding beneath oceans like silent predators, and aircraft slicing clouds with sound-breaking speed. But it wasn't the technology that disturbed him. It was the humans using it. Ziltrax had studied over 300 intelligent species in his time. Most fought when needed, some only when cornered. But humans? They fought with purpose, with strategy, with emotion. They trained themselves to run toward chaos. Not just soldiers, but firefighters, medics, even civilians. In one recording, a young soldier was pinned down under gunfire. He had lost his unit, alone, injured, surrounded. Still, he moved. He crawled through mud and glass to rescue a child he had never met, shielding her with his own body as bullets flew past. He lived, barely. When asked why he did it, he simply said, "Because I could, so I did." That sentence haunted Ziltrax more than any explosion. In another file, a small town was struck by disaster, earthquake. Buildings collapsed, roads cracked open. Fires burned through neighborhoods. Before rescue teams could arrive, dozens of civilians, teenagers, elders, strangers, ran into the rubble, pulling people out with bare hands. No plan, no equipment, just instinct. Are they trained for this? Ziltrax asked his AI assistant. Negative. Untrained civilians. Estimated risk of death, 74%. Estimated concern for risk, 0%. Madness, Ziltrax whispered. Or maybe something else. He shifted his focus to the most advanced human warriors, elite special forces. Their missions were often secret, silent. But he found the shadows anyway. These humans trained for pain. They pushed their bodies to the edge of death every day, willingly. They froze in snow, starved for days, climbed cliffs with no ropes, dived into oceans at night, and practiced killing with terrifying precision, not because they hated, but because they refused to fail. They broke their own minds, just to make them harder to break. What kind of species does that to itself? He read their mottos. The only easy day was yesterday. Embrace the suck. Pain as weakness leaving the body. These were not just sayings. They were truths written in blood and sweat. Ziltrax logged his thoughts. Humans do not prepare for comfort. They prepare for war, even during peace. Their strength is not in size or speed, but in willingness. They do not enjoy pain, but they will endure any amount of it for those they protect. Then, he discovered something worse. They didn't fight only with fists and weapons. They fought with ideas. He found stories of peaceful resistance. People standing still while tanks rolled toward them. People singing while being arrested. People holding signs instead of guns, and still winning battles. Ziltrax watched one video of a woman facing armed soldiers alone. She did not move, did not speak, just stood there. The soldiers lowered their weapons first. "I don't understand them," Ziltrax said out loud. The AI responded softly. Perhaps you're not meant to understand. Only witness. He sat in silence. Then, as if the universe wanted to prove a point, a new message came from Earth. A news report. Global. An asteroid. Large enough to destroy a continent. Heading toward Earth. Galactic protocol would say to evacuate or seek aid from the Union. But Earth did something else. Within hours, the entire planet moved like a single mind. Scientists, soldiers, civilians, rival countries, enemies, friends, politicians, hackers, farmers, all united. They started building machines, rockets, shields, plans, sacrifices. They had no promise of success, but they refused to give up, and just before impact, they launched everything they had. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough. The asteroid was destroyed. The planet was saved. Ziltrax's final log for the night was short. They are not made for war. They make war. Only when they must. But when they do, they are the most dangerous force I've ever seen. Not because they hate, but because they protect. And they do not stop. He turned off the screen. Looked again at the glowing planet below. A planet of pain. A planet of fire. A planet of warriors, not born, but built. Asterisk. There are moments in the galaxy when the silence breaks, when stars tremble, when entire worlds pause, when even the deepest parts of space seem to hold their breath. This was one of those moments. The warning came in the middle of a quiet rotation. Ziltrax was reviewing ancient Terran poetry. Strange, beautiful fragments of madness and meaning when the alarm struck. Not from Earth, not from the humans. From the Galactic Union itself. Red alert. Category 9. System 138 is indirect. Path of Class Omega entity. Probability of total planetary destruction. 99.8%. It wasn't an attack. It was worse. A cosmic event. A force with no emotion, no warning, no negotiation, just mass, speed, and death. A planet-killer asteroid, older than recorded time, silently tearing through the dark toward Earth. The Union's protocols were clear. Do not interfere with non-member worlds. Let nature decide. Ziltrax stared at the message. He knew what the Union expected Earth to do. Nothing. After all, this was how most young species ended, quietly, without drama. One rock, one explosion, one extinction. That was the math, but Earth had never followed math. It followed will. Down below. Across every time zone and nation, the humans responded, not with screams, not with surrender, but with plans. Satellites blinked to life. Communication waves danced across oceans and skies. Enemies became partners. Scientists stopped sleeping. Factories roared. Nations erased borders, not on paper, but in purpose. The asteroid was 2 weeks away. That's all they had. 14 days to survive the impossible. And they got to work. Ziltrax watched from orbit in stunned silence as the humans transformed. It wasn't chaos. It was something far more dangerous. Unity. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't argue about who should lead. They moved, like blood rushing to a wound. They didn't know if they could stop the asteroid, but they would die trying. Together. One global broadcast echoed across all networks, translated into every language. We were born on a world that kills us every day, and we learn to survive it. We will not go quietly. We are not just defending our planet. We are defending our right to exist. Let the stars watch. Let history record. Earth is not done yet. In orbit, Ziltrax watched weapons become tools. Warships became launch platforms. Cargo ships were stripped down and turned into kinetic slings. Civilian volunteers helped with calculations, metalwork, cooling systems, anything they could do. Even children donated their toys for parts. They called the project Hammer of Earth. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't clean, but it was real. The asteroid entered the solar system, visible now as a burning dot of doom. The Union did nothing. But Earth? Earth launched everything. Rockets screamed into the void. Missiles carved trails of light across space. Space stations detached their cores and fired themselves like bullets. Nuclear payloads, laser bursts, rail cannons, every tool humanity had ever made, now aimed at one target. One chance. It wasn't about power. It was about pressure. Impact after impact tore into the asteroid's surface. Pieces shattered, broke, spiraled into fire. But the core remained fast, furious, unstoppable, until the last weapon fired. A ship. Not a drone. Not an AI. A crewed mission. 4 humans who volunteered knowing they wouldn't return. They carried the last explosive package, a direct impact delivery. They didn't hesitate. As the asteroid filled their view, one of them smiled and said, "Tell our planet we were proud." And then, silence. The asteroid cracked, crumbled, broke apart into pieces that burned in Earth's atmosphere, lights dancing across the night, like stars falling in reverse. Humanity had won. Not just by science. By sacrifice. By unity. By the one thing that could never be measured, their refusal to give up. The Galactic Union watched the entire thing. Billions of species, thousands of civilizations, all witnessing something they never expected. The tiny, violent, unstable species from the Deathworld. Striking back, they reran the footage again and again. Not just the explosion, but the way humanity reacted, with speed, with passion, with something the Union had forgotten how to feel. Hope. For the first time in 1,000 cycles, the Union called an emergency meeting. The result was unanimous. Earth would no longer be ignored. They would no longer be feared from a distance. They would be recognized. A new file was created in the Union's archives. Species, human homeworld, Earth, reclassified to Deathworld Class 14. Status, potential galactic member. Note, caution advised, resourceful, united under threat, emotionally volatile. Will risk everything for even the chance of survival. From his orbit, Ziltrax opened a final transmission to the human station. "I saw your fire. I saw your fear. I saw your fury. And now I see your heart." The reply came not from a soldier or a commander, but a young girl from a global broadcast station. She smiled into the camera. "This is Earth. We are still here." The stars were quiet again, but this time it felt different. They weren't silent because they were resting. They were silent because they were watching. News of Earth's survival had traveled across the galaxy like a shockwave. A planet that should have been vaporized, a species that should have collapsed under pressure, had instead united, fought, and won. Not with mercy from higher powers, not with help from advanced civilizations. They had done it alone. From observation, decks to homeworld capitals, billions of eyes now turned toward that small blue planet in System 138, the Deathworld. The experiment gone wrong. The mistake that refused to die. And in the middle of all that attention stood the humans. They didn't speak loudly. They didn't make threats. They didn't send fleets. They simply said, "We're ready." Ziltrax had returned to the Galactic Council for the first time in years, not as a junior xenobiologist, but as a witness, a messenger, and perhaps, he thought, as someone who had been changed by the very thing he had once feared. The council hall was enormous, a floating structure surrounded by starlight, where species from every corner of the galaxy gathered. Tall ones, glowing ones, beings with wings, scales, liquid skin, electrical minds. They all listened as Earth's representative stepped forward. She was human, of course, but not what the council expected. No general, no politician. Just a scientist, a woman named Dr. Layla Morgan, quiet voice, calm face, eyes that had seen war, but still believed in building things after. She stood at the center of the chamber, holding nothing but a datapad. "Members of the Galactic Union," she said, "thank you for watching us die, and thank you for watching us live." The room shifted. "We know what you called us. Class 13, Class 14, a death world, we understand. Our world is violent. It burns, it shakes, it floods, it freezes. It forces us to adapt. And in return, we have become something you were not prepared for." Some scoffed, some leaned in. "We are not invincible. We bleed. We break. But we are the only species in known space that wakes up every day on a world that wants to kill us. And still makes breakfast." There were murmurs in the chamber. "You feared us because you saw our wars, but you never saw our healers. Our builders, our teachers. You judged our rage, but you never understood our grief." She tapped her datapad. Behind her, a hologram unfolded, not of weapons, but of human history. The Great Wall, the moon landing, the Voyager, the first hospital, a child's drawing sent into space. The sound of laughter in a war zone. Dr. Morgan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You feared that one day we would leave Earth and bring chaos to the stars. Maybe you're right. But maybe we'll bring fire and hope and music and stubbornness and rescue crews and rebuilt cities and survivors." She looked around. "You call us dangerous. We call it being human." For a long moment there was nothing. Then one by one, species that had once classified Earth as unfit for contact lowered their restrictions. Not because they trusted humanity, but because they now respected it. The Council voted. And for the first time in galactic history, a death world species, once blacklisted, ignored, avoided, was granted observer status. Earth had stepped out of the fire, and now it stood among the stars. Back on his ship, floating in orbit above Earth, Ziltrax recorded his final entry. They were never meant to survive. The storm should have drowned them. The beasts should have eaten them. The wars should have ended. The asteroid should have silenced them. But they are still here. He paused. They are not the strongest, or the fastest, or the oldest, but they are something rarer. They are the ones who don't stop. He looked once more at the planet. Blue, wild, alive. "This is Earth. Welcome to Deathworld 14. May you never face it as an enemy." He closed the file and wondered, deep in his strange alien heart, if maybe, just maybe, this chaotic species, born in pain and raised in storms, was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not perfection, not peace, but a spark.